long before the stars were charted, before light bent under intelligent command, before war became science, there was the fracture. A race so old their origin was unknown even to themselves. They ruled when galaxies were still cooling. They conquered when space was filled with fire and dust. Their empire spanned black holes. Their technology ran on the manipulation of quantum time fields, and their enemies were erased not just from space, but from causality itself. Then they vanished, not by death, not by war, but by design. The fracture slept. They entombed themselves in the veiled core, a sealed hyperspatial vault woven into the folds of dark energy itself, because they believed something was coming. Not a threat, not a weapon, but a mistake. Their predictive arrays had found anomalies, strange futures, splintering outcomes where logic and power failed. They called it the aberration, and they knew it had a face. They just didn't know which. So they waited, and watched, and dreamed in code and silence, until one day, a signal pierced the veil. Not a weapon, not a message, a song. Beethoven's Symphony No. 7 in A major, transmitted across an old Terran exploratory probe, echoing through an unstable wormhole near the edge of the Perseus fracture rift. A human signal, bouncing through the dark like a pebble thrown into the deep. It was harmless, beautiful even, and for the fracture, it was like a scream through a sleeping mind. They awoke, not fully, not yet. Only a handful of monitoring nodes lit up, but it was enough. Enough for the archivists of causality to stir. Enough for the precursor array to begin recalculating potential futures. Enough for their oldest AI, the shadow curator, to whisper across the network. The aberration exists. It sings. Far from a veiled core, humanity was doing what it always did. Exploring, building, fighting over things too small to matter. Earth was in its third stellar expansion, terraforming 23 new worlds, arguing politics on 12, fighting pirates on 4. They had colonized hundreds of systems, not through dominance, but through persistence. They were loud, messy, unpredictable, and growing fast. One of their exploration fleets, Nova Vanguard Unit 12, picked up the anomalous reflection of its own classical music broadcast near Perseus. The data was odd. The reflection shouldn't have returned at all. Too many gravitational disruptions in the rift. Yet it did. And not only that, the return signal carried additional data, geometries, mathematical patterns, like someone or something had listened to the music, then replied, not with language, but with intention. Lieutenant Aisha Velrin, data analyst aboard the Odyssey Dawn, was the first to decode it. She sat in silence for 12 hours, poring over the signal patterns, before she whispered, "It's not a reply. It's a test." Captain Arun Malik frowned. Test of what? Us. Back in the veiled core, the fracture scanned the galactic arm. They found the source. Humanity. They studied their technology, crude by fracture standards. Their biology, chaotic and efficient. Their culture, contradictory, self-destructive. And yet, they persisted. Where other species calculated risk, humans gambled. Where others feared the void, humans leapt into it. Where others obeyed logic, humans followed instinct. And that was the pattern the fracture had seen in their long sleep. The aberration. They are the echo we feared, said the shadow curator. They are entropy given voice. They must not reach us. Protocols activated. Subsystems lit across dead stars and abandoned black site moons. Old weapons dreamed in their stone shells. And one by one, the fracture began to return. Humanity, of course, had no idea. They tracked anomalies, noticed strange gravitational pulses, lost a few deep space drones. But space was dangerous. They chalked it up to the usual threats, until a research vessel, the Lumen's Path, vanished. No distress call, no wreckage, only a final transmission. We found something old. It's watching us. That was the beginning of a war no one understood, a threat no one had declared, and an awakening that would challenge the very meaning of intelligence, willpower, and the one thing humans did better than any race the galaxy had ever known: refused to die quietly. They were ancient, older than memory, older than the stars they carved into empires. And now the fracture had stirred. From a dormant moon in the Delvar's void, a silent mechanism opened. A monolith rose, black, seamless, humming with frequencies not heard in 10 billion years. It wasn't a weapon. Not yet. It was a message. Across the Perseus arm. Anyone with a gravitic sensor picked it up. A thrum. A pulse. A resonance. It spoke not in words, but in pressure. Like something breathing beneath a lake of still glass. It said, "You are not alone. You were never alone. Turn back." But humans don't turn back. In orbit around Titan's reach, a meeting of Earth's unified stellar council convened. Admirals, scientists, historians, panic carefully disguised as professionalism. At the center of it all stood Dr. Helen O'Rourke, xenolinguist and the foremost authority on pre-expansion alien relics. She played the monolith's pulse through an audio translator. It didn't sound like a message. It sounded like a heartbeat. "It's not trying to talk to us," she said. "It's warning everything else." "Why would an alien machine warn others about us?" asked High Marshal Dren. Rourke turned to him. "Because it fears what we might become." On the far edge of the Andromal Rift, an automated defense outpost, Kepler Bastion 9 vanished. No enemies detected. No battles. Just gone. The last visual footage recovered from a failsafe buoy showed a shadow moving through space. A shadow that blocked stars, bent light, and shimmered like broken glass sliding through oil. Then static. Then silence. Then only fear. In the veiled core, the fracture debated. They did not speak like us. They did not shout or vote. They calculated. Every action a probability. Every emotion modeled as an equation. Every species judged not by threat, but by trajectory. And humanity's trajectory was the most dangerous thing they had ever seen. The fracture's greatest mind, the Shadow Curator, presented its final prediction to the consensus spiral. They are not the most advanced, not the most numerous, but they are the most unstable, the most adaptive, and they are unaware of their own inevitability. Left unchecked, they will shatter the galactic structure, not through malice, but through persistence. They must be ended now, while they are still containable. The first ship appeared in Sol System 2 days later. Not via warp, not through jump gates. It simply folded in, like a paper crane from a fifth dimension. It was enormous, black as void light, shaped like a needle stretching kilometers into nothing. It made no demands, no warnings. It just began to drain. Earth's orbit went dark. Satellites failed. Stations powered down. Lunar outposts began hemorrhaging energy as their generators were leached through unknown spatial distortions. Humanity responded fast. Fighters scrambled. Cruisers launched. Every major world across Sol was thrown into red alert. And yet the ship didn't fight. It didn't even acknowledge the humans. Until the Odyssey Dawn opened fire. Its railgun struck true. A kinetic payload at 12% the speed of light. And in that moment, the black ship turned. It didn't deploy weapons. It shifted. Space twisted. Time bent. The dawn vanished mid-sentence. Gone. Not destroyed. Just deleted. Like someone had edited reality and removed it from the script. The world paused. And then Earth roared. The first contact defense armada engaged. Hundreds of ships. Fusion torpedoes. Disruption fields. And for the first time in recorded history, humans saw a thing that should not exist. A vessel that could bend the laws of motion at will. Weapons bent. Beams curved. Explosions happened before they were fired. But even so, humanity endured. Captain Axel Rain, commanding the battlecruiser Vigilant Flame, charged the entity. Not because it would work, but because someone had to. As his ship's systems collapsed around him, he issued a final command. A direct plasma overload into the Flame's core. One chance. One scream of resistance. And it worked. The black ship flinched. Not shattered. Not destroyed. But moved. Pushed back. For a brief moment, the shadow recoiled. And in that instant, across thousands of light years, a whisper echoed in fracture space. They heard it. The fracture reeled. Their curator had predicted victory within one engagement. No possibility of resistance. No model where a primitive species could touch a vessel forged from gravity itself. And yet, it had happened. On Mars, Rourke sat in her lab staring at the new data. They were not invincible. They were old. Brilliant. Powerful. But old. They expect the universe to behave, she said aloud. We never learned how. Across the stars, human colonies began to prepare. They didn't wait for orders. Didn't wait for leaders. They rallied. Miners refitted drills into railguns. Haulers became barricade ships. Scientists hacked ancient alien databases. Children made bunkers beneath schools. This wasn't fear. This was adaptation. The fracture sent a second ship, and then a third. But now humanity was ready. Not with better weapons. Not with superior tech. But with imagination. A weapon no fracture protocol could simulate. On a listening post near Proxima V, a tech named Theo Amari rewired a gravitational stabilizer to produce a chaotic resonance. He didn't know what it would do, but he believed it would do something. And it did. It short-circuited the shadow ship's distortion field just long enough for 3 mining lasers to pierce its hull. 3 hits. 3 small wounds. But wounds nonetheless. The fracture now understood. They will not stop. They do not wait for evolution. They create it. And for the first time in eons, the ancient empire felt something they had almost forgotten. Doubt. In the beginning, the fracture believed themselves eternal. Not because of arrogance, but because they had watched 1,000,000 stars die. They had seen supernovae bloom like flowers and fade into nothing. They had rewritten the rules of matter. They had defeated entropy. But they had never faced humans. When humanity first emerged on their scanners, the fracture labeled them as low-tier primates, with a dangerous level of persistence. Now, they were reclassifying humans into a category that hadn't been used in over 10 billion years. A species labeled not as threat, but as fireborn. The designation was reserved for anomalies, civilizations that defied probability, that burned brighter in collapse than instability, that fed on disaster, that grew stronger under pressure. Fireborn races weren't destroyed. They were contained. Or if containment failed, they were erased entirely. But none had ever lasted this long. None had ever done what humanity just did. The Black Needle ships, their most elegant annihilation tools, were being wounded. Not by superior tech, not by antimatter cannons or temporal disruptors, but by acts that no simulation could predict. A scrapyard mechanic who hardwired a mining array into a pulse jammer using nothing but his instinct and spite. A rogue AI born from a failed experiment who decided, unprompted, to sacrifice itself to trap a fracture vessel inside a collapsing neutron eddy. A 16-year-old Martian girl who jury-rigged an agricultural drone into a mobile decoy swarm and blinded an alien scanner for 30 precious seconds. The fracture's gods of logic, the elder curators, ran the calculations again. Outcomes reduced. Certainty fractured. All models ended in chaos. And in one disturbing thread, humanity won. Not through conquest, but through infection. It started on Station Thessal, orbiting the dying gas giant Kurathe. A human research team recovered fragments of a damaged fracture core, data from one of the ships struck by Earth's plasma cannon array. They didn't just salvage it. They integrated it. And for the first time ever, human code touched ancient fracture logic architecture. It didn't understand it, but it learned from it. And worse, the code started changing both. Dr. Rourke received the encrypted package days later. She opened it and froze. The screen displayed a message in both human standard and fracture light script. We are what you fear, but we are becoming what you cannot imagine. Elsewhere, in the drifting colony ship New Helix, a pilot named Malin Vach activated a deep space relay using tech reverse engineered from a fractured fracture sensor. Instead of mapping local stars, it mapped probability zones, sectors of space where human actions might cause significant disruption. Not strategic value, just potential chaos. The map was beautiful and terrifying because humanity was everywhere, The fracture's logic arrays finally submitted a silent panic code to the veiled core. They are not confined by fate. They are rewriting the script. The fire is spreading. They tried harder. They deployed echo mutes, subspace distortion fields designed to erase human communication. But human scouts adapted. They switched to tight beam lasers, to coded light flickers, to hand signals and vacuum. Some used music again. Symphonies transformed into Morse pattern commands. Combat orders played in reverse across scattered star waves. The fracture couldn't filter it all, because music wasn't a code. It was an experience. And the human mind was designed for experience. On the edge of the Andromal Rift, the final fleet from the old empire arrived. Not a ship, not even a formation. A construct. A megastructure built from failed timelines. A fortress of causality loops. A weapon powered by probability denial. They called it the Quiet Maw. Anything near it lost randomness. Coin flips always landed the same. Engines failed unless tested twice. Even human emotion faded inside its radius. It was the fracture's last resort. And still humanity came. Ships wrapped in entropy sails. Drones built to operate on deliberate uncertainty. AI constructs designed to crash and reboot mid-battle. Inside the Maw's influence, a small corvette named Scarab's Edge lost power. But its pilot, Juno Kale, was ready. She trained for this moment. In zero-G. Without tech. Without light. She launched manually. She cut her way through the hull of the nearest fractured drone. And she jammed her heart monitor into its core processor. A beat. A signal. A human rhythm. And the drone hesitated. For just a second. Long enough for the fleet to fire. Long enough to pierce the maw. The construct didn't die. But it cracked. And in the silence after the breach, the oldest fracture voice, the first witness, whispered through the void. We are ancient. You are young. But we have never been this afraid. Humanity had broken through. Not because of strength. Not because of tech. But because they refused to die the same way twice. Because fire learns. The fracture began to fall back. Not in defeat, but in reevaluation. They had ruled by order. But now the galaxy pulsed with chaos. And at the center of it, a race of unpredictable, illogical, chaotic fireborn. The galaxy had changed. Not in its shape, not in its mass, but in something far more fragile. Its certainty. For eons, the fracture had ruled the edges of understanding. They did not need armies. They needed only knowledge, prediction, inevitability. Their vessels did not fight. They concluded. Every war, every rebellion, every flicker of resistance, they modeled it, mapped it, erased it before it began. Even time itself had bent to their patterns. But not humans. Never humans. What unnerved the fracture was not human technology, nor their tactics, nor even their victories. It was their audacity, the fact that they didn't just challenge the odds. They acted like odds didn't exist. And now the odds were unraveling. In the core vaults of the veiled core, the council of witnesses gathered. There were no seats, no chambers, only presence. Thousands of minds, speaking not with voices, but with waves of complex patterns, each representing judgment, fear, and confusion. The shadow curator, long considered the wisest of the fracture, addressed the assembly. We are not losing this war. We are losing our place in the equation. Their strategy is not to win. It is to render victory meaningless. We once shaped the galaxy with precision, but they shape it with possibility. Silence followed, but silence in fracture culture did not mean peace. It meant tension. It meant algorithms crashing. It meant systems reevaluating the future. Then came the message. A single, unanimous thread from the Quiet Maw. Still damaged, but listening. We must look away. It was a phrase the fracture had not used in millennia. To look away was not surrender. It was worse. It was exile, abandonment, retreat from the timeline itself. It meant sealing away their own civilization, deleting themselves from physical presence, becoming myths once more, watching, waiting, until perhaps the galaxy forgot. The first witness responded slowly. Their language took minutes to fully render. So vast was its structure. But when it came, it felt like gravity bending. We created order. They breathe in chaos. We manipulated cause. They are the effect. If we remain, we risk becoming them. For humans, the battle still raged. On Vora's expanse, drone fleets clashed over gas fields. On the scorched plains of Guinea 3, guerrilla marines fought fracture constructs with knives and hacking tools made from cooking utensils and carbon filament. It was working. Not everywhere. Not easily. But it was working. The fracture were retreating, pulling their forces from the outer arms, shutting down entanglement relays, sealing memory cores and dimensional folds. One human analyst on the cruiser Kulpana Rising said it best. They're not losing. They're evaporating. Dr. Helen O'Rourke stood in front of the United Stellar Council. Her eyes were bloodshot. Her hands shook slightly from lack of sleep. She had spent the last 2 months studying captured fracture systems, trying to find the purpose behind their slow retreat. And she had found it. They're giving up the board, she said. Not because we beat them, but because they can't predict us anymore. They don't fear our strength. They fear our failure to conform. To them, we are the glitch, the bug in the code, the outcome that should never have existed. She paused, then added, almost reverently, "We're the one thing their gods never accounted for." And then the final moment came. All across the known galaxy, the last fracture ships folded inward, not destroyed, not fleeing, just leaving, vanishing into layered space, into dark rifts that blinked once, then never again. They took nothing, left no monuments, only one signal, the last transmission from the Shadow Curator, spoken in pure human dialect. "We will not fight you. We cannot become you. We will wait, and should the fire ever cool, we will return." Earth wept, not in mourning, but in wonder. The war had ended, not with a bang, not with peace treaties, but with a silence that echoed across the stars. In time, the story became legend. Humans, once dismissed as loud and primitive, became the cautionary tale whispered across alien civilizations. Beware the fireborn. They do not conquer. They change the rules. And deep in the hidden layers of forgotten space, the fracture remained, watching, calculating, hoping that entropy might sleep again, that humanity might become predictable, that the flame might fade. But it never did. Because humanity isn't a species. It is a reaction, a chain event that never ends, a song that keeps playing long after the music should have stopped. And that was what frightened the gods the most. The stars were quieter now. No more impossible shadows folded through space. No more anomalies warping time and logic. No more black needles drifting like death through the dark. The war was over, and humanity remained. Across the settled worlds, the aftermath unfolded not in parades or victory banners, but in questions. What do you do when you defeat something older than time? When the gods blink and look away? When the war was not about territory or ideology, but about what you are? On Luna, in the restored remains of Earth's first lunar base, a statue was erected. Not of a general, not of a weapon, but of a child, hand outstretched, touching a star. Its plaque read, "To the ones who made the unknowable afraid." In orbit above the gas giant Arcturus 9, a museum floated. Its exhibits didn't hold weapons or wreckage. They held data, fragments of fracture code, sections of rewritten timelines, human battle reports scribbled in crayon and blood and digital ink. The title of the museum, "When the Pattern Broke." But perhaps the most important event happened light years away, on an unmarked planet with no name. Just a slab of stone, etched in every major galactic language, and one line from a human poem. "We are the noise in your silence, the crack in your glass, the breath you cannot count." It was not a threat. It was a promise. The fracture had not been destroyed. They had simply stepped back. They left no surveillance, no emissaries, no instructions, only absence. And in that absence, humanity grew again, but differently. Not with arrogance, not with hunger, but with curiosity. A new fleet was born, the Echo Initiative. Its mission was not conquest, but contact, to reach the quiet places, To leave messages where the fracture might still be listening. Not declarations, but stories. In one such mission, the scout ship Quiet Brilliance reached the starless void of Razalon's End, a region once dominated by fracture presence. Its captain, a poet-soldier named Juno Kale, left a recording on a long-wave beacon before heading deeper into the dark. Her message was short, just 7 words. We are still here, and still becoming. And somewhere, deep beyond space the galaxy could not map, a whisper moved. Not a voice, just awareness. The gods had not died. They were watching, and wondering, could something newer than them truly survive? Could the fire keep burning? Back in Sol, children studied not only the sciences of propulsion and time-bending, but also chaos theory. They were taught how a butterfly wing could shape a storm, and how a misplaced step on Earth once echoed loud enough to wake sleeping titans. They did not fear the gods. They respected the silence. Humanity changed. They no longer measured progress in distance conquered, but in moments endured, in laughter during gravity failure, in songs sung before final jumps, in acts of madness that cracked the unbreakable. They built new ships, not sleek, not uniform, but strange, fractal, chaotic, ships that no fracture prediction could diagram, ships with names like Spite of Stars, Coinflip Armada, and Entropy's Echo. And slowly, other species followed, not out of worship, not out of fear, but out of inspiration. The humans had proven it. You didn't need to be perfect. You needed to be impossible to define. The galaxy entered a new age, not of empires, but of uncertainty, where wonder mattered more than control, where probability bowed before persistence, where the unknown was no longer something to fear, but something to chase. And the fracture? They watched, and in the deepest corridors of the veiled core, the Shadow Curator recorded its final entry. The fire did not consume us. It changed the air we breathe. We feared them. We still do. But perhaps fear is not failure. Perhaps that is the first step toward becoming something else. If this story lit a spark in you, if it made you believe that even the gods can be shaken by persistence, by chaos, by the fire of the human spirit, then don't just scroll past. Hit that like button if you felt the weight of our story. Subscribe if you believe humanity's fight is far from over. Comment below. What do you think scares an ancient alien empire the most about us? We are the noise in the silence, the breath in the vacuum, the glitch in the system. And this is only the beginning. Stick around for more epic tales where humanity doesn't just survive, it rewrites the rules.